So, hey everyone, Kevin Wolf, founder of So Helpful. We're here to do a hangout on Jen Mendez is going to teach us a little bit about ethics and being helpful and how you can use that as part of your business strategy. And we were just doing some intros and chatting before the broadcast started, and I was mentioning how Jen and I had been talking about this idea after being on some previous hangouts. Typically, when I talk about doing things that are related to business and startups, I tend to be very tactical. The way I talk about things is very like task oriented in terms of getting stuff done. Jen raised a good point about really the principles of making helpful a part of your I guess the core values of your business. And this is a subject that had always interested me because I looked at companies that we all respect, like Zappos, and of course is well known, but even emerging companies that I work with, like Buffer and Customer IO, where it's not just about providing good customer experience, which is sort of kind of cliche, but actually going just building to the core of the organization, what it's like to be helpful and how they interact with everybody. And Jen wanted to talk a little bit about that, and so we did a previous hangout, and then we did some follow-up and talked about the other ideas, and had a couple of emails back and forth. And so she's going to talk about it today. And Jen, I'm assuming you want to make this more of a dialogue like you did the last one as well, where we can sort of jump in whenever we have questions or want to talk about topics.
Please do jump in anytime. Again, I do apologize for the delay, so hopefully we don't have any talking over, but please jump in anytime. I definitely want to make this a dialogue. It's not just about me. It is about me sharing some ideas and some things that I'm doing and some things I'm playing with and that others that I know have done and are using and are very successful with, but I want to talk about what's happening for you guys as well. So jump in anytime.
Great. Okay, so then I'm going to go ahead and mute my mic. And of course, I muted my mic as I was talking, which is obviously a bad idea. 'Cause that's why that's so the mute button works. That's why the sound suddenly died. So if you go ahead and click on Jen's picture and Hangout, then it'll show, it won't jump around. And with that, Jen, I'll turn things over to you. Do you have the slides ready to go?
I do. Here, I'll put them up. And again, as Kevin mentioned, this is sort of an extension from what we were talking about a few days ago, which he records. If you're interested, you can always go back. But really, it's what we talked about the other day is philosophy. And what I want to talk about today is a little bit of the philosophy behind actual, real life examples that people, again, some things that I am doing myself and that I have coming up, and things that are initiated by me, things that are initiated by other people within what I call a business ecosystem. So what I want to talk about is, when you're thinking about helpfulness, doing less with more. And that's not wrong. That's actually the right way for me to write that out. It's not about trying to do more with less. It's just the opposite. It's kind of like the idea of time. So, a lot of people think I don't have enough time. I have to do more in what I have. I have to do more with less, and they're always feeling like they're running behind. But instead of thinking about managing your time, if you think about managing your priorities, and you only put the things that are of high priority into your life, doing less, but with so much more and gain so much more out of it. And so that's kind of what this is about. It's about thinking, how can I stack functions, full payoffs, and for each one of those payoffs, can I have multiple things that are feeding into that? And how do I do that? So the idea of, again, doing less with more, which is a different way to think about it, but helpfulness is absolutely essential to that. So one of the things I want to start with, and thanks to Kevin, he actually found this particular article just a couple days ago. I don't get a chance all the time to scan and said, oh my gosh, Jen, this is just exactly what we were talking about. So Tesla, the company, the electronic cars, just came out and said, we are not going to legally go after anyone who uses our technology and applies it with good faith, right? So that they're trying to do good things in this world like we are. or like they're saying. So we have all these patents, and we're just gonna give them away. And you might be thinking, all right, what on earth would they be doing that for? How does it benefit? Don't you normally build a business and have IPR, and you protect it through legal rights and things that you do? What happened is Tesla, and they've come out with the technology, right? And they have a very niche market, but that's it. They don't have anything to build on. So by actually quote unquote being helpful, right, by giving away their patents, they're doing several things that benefit others. It benefits their broader long-term business goals of trying to get more people to think about sustainability in their life. Whether or not you agree with the technology side of how they're doing it, totally different issue, but that is one of their stated goals. And so by actually being helpful and giving away information to competitors, they are actually in the long term benefiting their own business and their own business goals. By using more of this open source method, not only do they get positive publicity, of course, but you don't have to spend time and money in lawsuits, which can result in negative publicity. It also, by more companies taking this technology and using it and building more cars, they actually validate their own company's worth. They validate their own ideas, their own technology, and their own product, even though then they're creating competitors as a result. By taking this approach to helpfulness with their competitors, not just with customers, but now competitors, they're actually very wealthy people who think it's going to be really cool to be able to drive this kind of car. And so they're going to take it potentially. If other people think now, hey, I can take this and we can maybe do something with this technology that would be within a reasonable scope of cost, now you're going to make something that costs $100,000 and bring it down to $30,000 and make it obtainable for a lot more people and make it something that's normal. And so there's a value to having a niche, but if it's so small and you can't grow it, then you get stuck, and that's kind of where they are. So by doing this, they're actually broadening their potential customer base, and it generates cooperative competition. And finally, I mean, one thing that's not mentioned in the article that I've linked here is that it actually builds community, but in multiple ways. Because one of the issues with electric cars is that you have to have a station to stop at, and there are some in the US anyway, but there are not a lot. And so it's seen as, geez, I don't know, even if I had this car, I don't know if I could get to where I want to go because the infrastructure isn't there, and no one is building it because there isn't enough demand. So a totally different way of thinking about actually doing more with less, giving something away, but gaining so much through this sort of approach to helpfulness. So I just have a couple things here I want you to think about. We're just going to think about them, put them in your pocket, and move on. And the first one is, do you want your business to survive or thrive? And of course, duh, I mean, we all know the answer to that. But are you building a permanence of culture in the way that you are thinking and approaching your business? Are you actually designing with a business ecosystem in mind, or are you thinking of yourself as a lone island? Second is, is what you're doing not only, neglecting potential business, right, potential customers, but actually repelling it. And so by that, I'm talking about edges and valuing the marginal. Again, pocket it. We're going to come right back. One earth is an edge. What does that mean? I just want you to be thinking and process these questions for a second about, what does this mean? How can I think about my business in a totally different way? And then finally, is what you're doing potentially missing capital worth that you can bring into your business? But to understand that, you have to think about the different forms of capital. And just a shout out real quick, the ideas I'm going to talk about are a compilation of several different people: Bill Mollison, David Holmgren, Ethan Rowland from Appleseed Permaculture, and Jack Spirko from the business podcast 5 Minutes with Jack. That these ideas that I'm going to be talking about come from those guys, originate from those guys, and I've sort of put them together in a slightly different way. So when you think of a permanence of culture, that's what permaculture stands for, the word, right? There are certain ethics and there are certain principles that go into it. Care of people, care of earth, return of surplus. That means anything that you get back, any sort of profit, any sort of yield, any sort of relationship that you build with people, that's a surplus. That's something extra. And then how do you choose to use that? And can you put it back into people or back into the earth? That's ultimately what it is. And permaculture has its grounding in nature, right? People think about building an eco-friendly, edible landscape, with fruit trees and nut trees. That's what people think about. But these ethics and then these principles actually apply to anything, and they most definitely apply to business. So the one principle I want to talk about, although every single one of these apply, and we could have a whole conversation on each one and what they really mean and how to look at your business through that way, but is to use edges and value the marginal. And so I want you to, just think about that and, okay, what are edges? And how does that help my business actually live and breathe and thrive, not just survive? So if you approach helpfulness like it's a technique, where you try and figure out, okay, my business process, do I insert helpfulness when I'm thinking about trying to make a sale, or do I insert helpfulness when it comes to customer service? And a lot of times, I see folks talking about, well, I want to be helpful, and it's all focused on customers, and that's an important piece, but that's not the only edge in your community, in your ecosystem, which I'll talk about what those are in a second. And a lot of times when you think of helpfulness as a technique, you don't seem very genuine. People are like, well, really, yeah, they're going to sell to me. And so when you try and detach your foundation of your business from helpfulness, and you try and just insert it every once in a while as a technique, you're really missing out, because you're not capitalizing on all the parts of your business. Ultimately an edge,
hey Jen,
just where two or more things. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in. That first point you make in there, I would say that's one of the that for me that's one of the biggest challenges, because I know like entrepreneurs, we're all looking, we're just basically also, we're all struggling and desperate to kind of look for the technique or the tactic that's going to work for us. And it's been hard for me to show other people that it's, look, you can't just blast out to your Twitter feed, hey, if you need help, grab some time with me. I'm going to come and get help from you. And I think part of it is you're right, that people, it seems disingenuous, like you're going to get, like it's a timeshare pitch, right? Like I'm going to come in there and get advice on hear about a vacation, and then someone's going to pitch me a timeshare for 3 hours. I think part of it is that it's just, you have to take steps to build trust, right? And it doesn't happen when you just blast somebody with an email and a link to your profile that says, hey, I'm here, come get some help from me, world, and wait for the stampede to happen. So this is totally true, and it's my challenge is trying to figure out how to turn this into a business. Is how do I get people to change the core of how they work?
And I'll add one thing. Sorry, this is Spike. I think for me, it's been, because I've had a couple of reviews where people were really saying, like, in the beginning were saying they were suspicious, because it's like, well, what's your business model? How come this is free? And that kind of stuff. And then through time, as they've seen consistency, they kind of really opened up to it. So for me, it's all about consistency. As you sort of, when you're honest, when that's truly the core principle, I think it shows. And actually, we're not talking like, I mean, I've been doing this for what? Since the beginning of the year, since I left Google and I started doing this more on a full-time kind of thing. So, in 4 months, I think that's a good period of consistency if you do it across all the mediums and in a very impartial way without favoritism, right? I'll help this person but not this person, and you're really honest and earnest in that attempt. I think it shows and people will recognize it.
Yeah, I
That
couldn't
was it.
agree more. I couldn't agree more, Spike. I think that's exactly the case. I think it's, when it comes to like many things, but when it comes to helpfulness, consistency, 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 then potentially content. But I mean, that consistency piece is so important because people are skeptical. Okay, sorry, I thought I'd heard someone else jumping in there for a second.
Yeah, Brian just joined.
So,
Hey, Jen. Hey, Jen, this is
oh, great,
Kevin.
yeah, go ahead.
Brian just joined, so I thought I'd let him give a chance to do a quick intro. And I'm getting a little bit of lag on my side, so I don't always hear the audio, so I'm going to go back on mute. But Brian, do you want to go ahead and do a quick intro?
Yeah, absolutely. I apologize. I just jumped in. You just want a little bit of intro about my background? Is that what you're looking for?
Just say, tell us hi, what you're working on. That's fine.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm working on a startup that's going to help small businesses find and hire quality part-time people. So that's the really quick elevator speech part of what I'm working on.
Great. And Brian's been a very successful entrepreneur in the past. He and I have had a couple calls about the way he's going about his business, and he's being very lean, testing a lot of things, and probably doesn't feel like it's rigorous, but it is rigorous. So, great to have you on the call, Brian.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. Again, sorry I'm late.
Well, welcome, Brian. I'll jump in. Again, there is a delay, so I'm holding off for a few seconds before I speak. So we were just talking about helpfulness and how if it's just a technique, it really puts people on edge. But if it's actually part of your ethos of your business, the core of your business, a permanence of culture within your business, then it takes on a whole different realm. And I was talking about edges, and that a lot of times we miss opportunities both for business development and for capital because we don't understand edges. And when we think of helpfulness, we think of a lot of times customers. I want to be helpful to my customers, and that is one edge. An edge is simply where two or more things touch, right? So this is just an example. This is by no means every single edge that could exist for a business, but there are interdepartmental edges that that you have that could be and should be touching each other, right? Marketing should be interacting with sales. Sales should be interacting with finance in a very ethical and reasonable way. And so you have all these departments, and even if you're a one-man business, which I would argue there's actually no such thing because you and your business touch other things, and therefore there is an entire ecosystem to your business. But you may be the person that is doing the marketing, doing the sales, doing the finance, doing the customer service, doing the training at this point. However, you're still not a one-man shop. It doesn't matter if you have then I have a bunch of managerial edges that exist, and so but even if you are thinking you're just doing this as lean startup, it's just me. What are you talking about? Your suppliers, your sponsors, your contractors, your strategic partners are all edges in your business, not just your customers. And if you can think about helpfulness and how if you have that as a foundation of your business, a foundation about how you lead your life and your business, then you actually are reaching out and elongating all of those edges with your business, and you have tremendous payback as a result. And it comes through an honest approach of helpfulness. But the other thing to think about when it thinks about edges is it's not just people. People obviously are a big piece of it, but anywhere that your business touches anything else. So technology, your website, is an edge. That's where your customers meet your business, right? So thinking about helpfulness and building that into your website or to your podcast or to your videos that you do, whatever it is that works in your business. Those are all edges where you meet up, and where you meet up not just with customers but also with competitors, another edge, which we just talked about, sponsors, potential sponsors, and then even think about the procedures that you do in your business, right? And the processes that exist. Those things are what let's talk about customers, what they experience, right? And so that's how they experience your business. And so if you can think about these things, you can start looking at helpfulness in a different way, instead of just trying to place it into customer service or just place it into sales. That it really can integrate. Does anyone have any thoughts real quick on just edges in general before I move on?
I'll mention one quick thing, which I think we talked about before in the previous call. There was a book written by Brent Cooper and Patrick Watzlawick, the guide, the entrepreneur guide to customer entrepreneurship guide to customer development. So it's a few years old, but it was very interesting because they had this alternative to sort of the business model canvas, where they were sort of doing a whiteboard, sort of blowout of all the components. And they really talked about this kind of concept, where instead of having this framework, static framework, the same way that the business model canvas is with the various boxes, they sort of draw on a whiteboard several circles for each entity. So that can be the website, it can be the partner, it can be the shop, it can be the end customer, all those different things that you sort of describe as entities. And then they had arrows as connections, and then they would look at those connections. And they weren't specifically talking about helpfulness, but they kind of hinted at looking at these edges and these connections between the different entities. So I think that's been present even in the Lean Startup movement to an extent in that kind of literature, and I think it's a very interesting concept, and I've been trying to look at it and way to teach that sort of thing. So I think it's very powerful, and people seem to connect very well with it. That's it.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this in our last call, Jen, but one of the ones that I've noticed successful companies doing is actually even just helping competitors. And I mean, that seems like so counterintuitive until you actually see what the companies are doing. And there's one that the best, I guess you just gave a great example with Tesla, because that's about as direct, that's about as direct as an example gets. But there was one that a company that I work with in Washington, D.C., and they talked about how they would actually put on for their competitors to teach them how to get into the business, basically how to do what they were doing. And she talked about the advantages they got in terms of work referrals. They became seen as an employer of choice, and it just generally raised how people talked about them in the community. And it wasn't I think back to it wasn't a technique or a tactic. It's just what they sort of just did, and it was working for them.
Yeah, that's an excellent example. I'm sort of doing something similar. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just doing if they're techies and people from tech world are watching, it might be useful even to think in terms of APIs. I think APIs are a good example of opening up one's platform, making it useful so that it can be used by other products, and products can be built on top of that product. So you're being helpful, and as a result, your community is also growing. A lot of companies have seen explosive growth once they've opened up and they've enabled others to build things on top of that.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent example. I think that API, the Linux, I think that's a great way of looking at it. Of here they are giving something away, but more comes back as a return. And I really like, Kevin, what you said about the other business and how they actually were training their competitors, because I'm doing something similar, which I'll talk about in a few slides here. And then going back, Spike, first thing you mentioned, I think that's so important. I don't think people think about often enough your own business model, like when you set it up, especially when you're talking about lean startup, because you're doing it as either one person show or maybe a couple people getting together. But thinking about if I had to sit down right now and sketch out my business on paper, what would it look like? Would it be a typical line and block chart that looks kind of like a triangle? Because there are not many edges that are meeting when you think of your business that way, right? It goes from one head person down to a few more down, but at no point does that head person touch anywhere else. And so thinking about through these either concentric circles or even a spiral, there are a lot of different patterns that are out there that you can think about. How do you want to actually design your business so that you can actually maximize these different things. I think that's excellent. All right, so it seems like everyone else is done commenting on that. So let me move forward here. Just a quick example I popped up there, Fed by Threads. It was actually a yoga shop that the two owners got together, and they actually got us some, what we consider junk mail, and they saw in there that the local food shelter was looking for food because like 15% or something like that of people in their area were going hungry. They said, all right, well, we have this yoga shop, what can we do? And they said, well, maybe we can just make our yoga shop sort of a place that people drop off donations. And so they thought about that, and then they said, you know what? These places are getting food all the time. What else can we really do? And then they realized that their customers for the yoga shop had been asking for T-shirts, and they thought, what if we combine these two? What if we stack functions, right? What if we now get some T-shirts made for our customers who want them anyway for our business, but we actually then take a bit of that profit and we give it back to our local food bank, not just in the form of food, but in form of money as well, so that they can use it for administrative costs as well. And then they started having their customers go, this is great, yeah, we want to buy this, but hey, what do you know about the shirt? Is it being, is it organic cotton? Is it being manufactured and with essentially slave labor from overseas? They actually had people come and say, hey, you know what, I like this idea. I like the fact that you are looking to do something social and help our local community, but just want to ask some of these questions. And they went, you know what, you're right, we should really look into this. Here we thought we were just going to do something, right, and just again, sort of this almost a technique of, let's put it out there to be helpful. And they didn't really think through all these other pieces. Lo and behold, they found out that their original source wasn't those things. And they went, wow, you know what? To really take care of people, we shouldn't be, purchasing a shirt that, is an hindrance or an issue for slave labor overseas. And so maybe we need to look at our local community. They ended up finding local farmers that raised organic cotton. They found local designers who wanted to be part of designing the T-shirt. They had local suppliers who wanted to become part of this entire process. And so they actually, through helpfulness, but through thinking about care of people, care of the earth, and then returning what they do have, what surplus they get to care for those things and to further, they actually were developing their entire business ecosystem. And before you knew it, they had these connections with not just customers who wanted to buy and then give some money to their food bank, but again, the suppliers, the sponsors, the farmers. And so it just extended from there. And so that's just one example of yet another company out there that has really started to recognize the edges and use them and what it can do through an ethos of helpfulness. The other thing to think about, though, if you really want to have helpfulness be part of your business, part of the core is you have to understand not only edges and how to use those responsibly with mutual respect, but capital. And so you think of, okay, everyone's like, I know what capital is, but capital really, okay, first of all, let me just say, not a CPA discussion. If you're in the US, this is not to be used when you file taxes with the IRS. This is for a different way of looking at your business. So capital really is anything that can be used to generate other forms of capital or can be exchanged for other forms of capital. I mean, it's nothing more than a symbol of energy. And so, we think of, financial capital, money, gold, silver, so on, Bitcoin, whatever it is. A lot of people think of material capital, the things you own as your business, the building, the furniture. A lot of people think of intellectual capital, your IPR. We were just talking about that and opening that up. But there are other forms of capital that exist and probably already exist in your business. But the question is, do you recognize them, and are you actually utilizing them and optimizing? I want you to be aware that these other forms of capital exist, and every single one of them have great value, because I can exchange any one of those for any of the other types of capital. And so I can take cultural capital and exchange it into financial capital if that's what I want. But when you look at your business in this way, you start to see helpfulness totally different, because what you're doing is generating capital for you and for everyone else in your business ecosystem. And so you start to see things differently. So let me give you, a few examples, things that I'm doing, and then some other folks that I know personally that are doing in their business. Taking this idea of edges and these different forms of capital, and then actually stacking functions, doing one thing and trying to get, numerous results. And one of them is thinking about your business like in sponsorship, right? So, and it sounds so simple, but a lot of, businesses and want to have that influx of capital right away. And so they take sponsors who come to them, instead of saying, you know what, and actually not just saying this, but putting it on your website in big bold letters and telling everyone in your ecosystem, you know what, I only take sponsors that I can personally vouch for, that I know have the same ethics as me and my business. I know that are a good match. I know that are here to do good things for my customers and the other parts of the other edges in my business. And if you even, show that you can't do that or won't do that once, you're gone. Don't care what you're willing to pay me. I'm willing to stand up, and letting your customers know that. That is a form of helpfulness that you don't often see nowadays. You see these websites and they've got all sorts of ads on them, or they're linked to things. But saying, you know what, I actually use these things, and that's what I'm going to allow as sponsors, for my business, because I care about you customers, because I only want to connect you with other edges that care for you, because I care that much. The other thing about sponsorship is that, providing value for value. So, they may be providing, financial capital in order to be a sponsor in your show, but you should be thinking about all those other forms of capital and how you can pay them back equivalent to what they're paying you, financial capital, and more. And so if you think about those other forms of capital, you can start doing that for other businesses out there. And it's just a different way of approaching it versus just, hey, you pay me so much and I can give you access to so many customers. But it's really, you know what, you are, sponsoring my show, but I'm able to provide, an access to my customers. But we have an incredible culture within my business where people feel loyal to our community, and your business starts to benefit from that cultural capital that we have as a community because you're now associated with us. So just thinking about it in a different way. Thinking about, for example, yeah, jump in.
Yeah. Hey, this is Kevin. I know that from our last call that you can't see the time while you have the presentation screen going, but we've got about 15 minutes left, and I know I was really interested in hearing more about if you're able to talk about it, like how the techniques you're using with your business, in particular how you're getting people ways to give you capital to help grow your business, even if they can't afford to pay for your product. And so I don't know if I'm jumping ahead but I just wanted to give you a quick shout out on the time so you knew. Yep.
Thanks, I appreciate it, because once the presentation's up. I can't see the clock. So yeah, that's actually coming up here in just a few. So thinking about just this idea, and then so with sponsors, not only putting something up, but can you bring them in and their intellectual capital that they can provide as far as like being a council of experts for you and for your customers. So that is one thing that I am personally doing. And another thing is community and helping, actually, which we sort of touched on earlier, but I'm actually working to create competitors on purpose. So the people that I'm talking with who are my customers, I am providing I'm providing all sorts of support so that they can actually do what I do, that they can write their own lesson plans, that they can so my and it's a community that's coming together to design an education curriculum, essentially, for children. So, but I'm purposely teaching both teachers and then parents out there who don't have a background how to do these things and actually but I actually want to inspire them, because not only will it further some of my goals for my business, which is, again, getting out the word about how to empower children, because the more people who are writing lesson plans and the more I can teach them how to do that, not only do they do it with their kids and their students, but they actually can put it onto my website and share it with our community so that other people can take their lesson plans and build on them and tweak them. And I'm also teaching them how to then take those things and put them onto other websites so that they are targeting traditional educators and the alternative education communities that are out there. So that, and they are the ones who are going to get the profit from that. But I and my business benefit because the name goes along with it, and the word is getting out. So it's building that, actually, by building competitors. My website, which we kind of talked about, so I'll skip over that one. But the last one there is a place to share. So providing a place where people can take what they are doing and put it up there. The only thing that I ask is that I license under Creative Commons, and so you can take my ideas, you can build them, you can tweak them, you can do what you want with them, as long as, one, you give PermaKids credit if that was the originator of the idea, and two, you then are willing to put your products out or services out under that same license, right, where you're willing to let other people build on yours. So taking those then, and then taking them to my customers, and with the membership that I'm doing, I'm providing value for value. And I do that in part by accepting, trading, and giving all forms of those capital that we talked about. So people don't have to become a member by paying me in dollars or paying by Bitcoin. Ways they can do that. So financially, financial capital, right? I ensure that my members get certain discounts that we talked about. So I'm providing, and again, sometimes people pay me with financial. That's sort of the easy one. But you have material capital. So I have people who want to actually, send me something. Someone is their hobby is knife making, and they want to trade and send me a knife that they made in exchange for for membership, and for X number of months for that membership, or for non-physical material things. So I provide electronic lessons. I provide podcasts available, and so I'm exchanging in material, which doesn't have to just be physical. It's also non-physical material capital, things that you own but you can exchange. Intellectual capital. So that's obviously often you think of what people know, and a lot of times people think of, okay, well, intellectual capital is what I know or any of my other business partners know. But really, intellectual capital needs to encompass what your customers know, which obviously Lean Startup folks are great about, but also includes what your suppliers know, what your sponsors know, any potential competitors if you can have a cooperative, competitive relationship, all those things are intellectual capital. And so, obviously so helpful. Great way to exchange intellectual capital. Just had a so helpful, or I'm sorry, I did have a so helpful call with someone that was great, but Hangouts, I just had one today, and we had a conversation with 6, 7 of us exchanging ideas, and someone afterwards emailed me and said, you know what, I'm ready to be more active. I want to actually do a Hangout, and I want to talk about this particular lesson that I'm creating, and I want to share my idea with others, and then I'm going to write it out and make it available for people. Can you help me do that? Can you help me get this information to other people's hands, because I want their feedback? So that person is actually feeding intellectual capital into my business, and I'm willing to exchange for that. And so social. A lot of times we think of Facebook or Twitter as social capital, and that is very much true. But building a community through things like podcasts, where I'm putting them out for free. You can get them anytime, and it's also intellectual capital, obviously, because there's information in there, but it's also or write to me, and I'm answering those or addressing those. Strategic partnerships with communities. Again, I'm actually helping people reach out and share their ideas and sell to other strategic partner communities. It doesn't have to be just in my website. And that actually comes back and benefits me. Living capital. I do have people who are like, you know what, I have these heirloom seeds. Hey, is that something you'd be willing to do? Or, donating. I have people, listen, I'm willing, I have X, Y, and that on behalf of Permy Kids, to this other organization. Is that something that you'd be willing to think about as value? Helps my business reproduce, grow, change, evolve, or interact. Is a form of capital and value. Experience people have. So again, the Hangouts, you notice how stacking of functions, one thing that I do overlaps multiple different forms of capital, and it's it is about me reaching out and saying, hey, you know what, let me share what I know, and then people coming back and saying, wow, great, let me share what I know, and now we can build on it, and oh, I like that idea, but what if you did this instead? And then coming up with their own lessons again, and moving beyond, and recognizing that everyone has intrinsic value. It's not owned by my business, but by having that mutual respectful relationship, we all battle. So and again, I'm educational, but think about it. If songs, dances, things that bring cultures together is valued, and it's a form that can only be held by the community as a whole, not necessarily by one individual. But I have people who are like, you know what, my either for my living or for my spare time, I like to write songs. What if I were to write something that you could use for your introduction and your conclusion on your podcasts, and provide that images that you could use to represent these things? Or if you don't have a logo for your business, someone stepping forward and saying, you know what, I actually do this as as my full-time job. Would you be willing to exchange? I'll create a logo for your business, and and incorporating. And it's not about you and being so concerned of controlling your business. It's understanding that when you think of helpfulness and integrating into your business becomes owned by all of these people. And so their input, instead of shunning or saying, well, yeah, thanks, and just kind of set it aside. Actually incorporate it into what you're doing.
Hey, hey, Jen.
And that's not religious at all. Yeah.
I'm sorry, you were about to wrap up, so I probably should let you wrap up. But I wanted to throw this out there to guess
This
you
is
and
the last
Spike.
one. And I was going to open up for
Okay.
questions.
Then I'll shut up.
So just last thing, there's again,
Yeah, sorry, yeah, go ahead, Jen. I'll let
the
you.
other capital, spiritual capital. And so that is not religious at all. It's the idea of holyarchic, which just means that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So, are people helping essentially evangelize? Are they helping spread the word? So if I have someone who comes to me and says, you know what, I would like to do a presentation on Permi Kids and this approach to learning at my next child's, PTO meeting, and they're helping actually make my business something that has life beyond me, and something that is actually living, and it ends up again being more as a result. So those are some of the things that I'm doing, where I'm actually accepting these other types of capital, and in exchange for different forms of value. So that's it. Just back to the beginning of thinking about your business. Permanence of culture, ecosystems instead of individual businesses, and then the edges and the forms of capital, and thinking about that in your business. So that's it. Thoughts?
Yeah, I was going to put one out to, I guess, to maybe Jen and Spike here, because it sort of intersects, I guess, a lot of what both of you are doing. But what strikes me as I look at all these different ideas is that the challenge I have is figuring out ways that I can, I guess, applying some of the the lean startup rigor to this is that I can look at all these different techniques, test them, and figure out what's working, what's not. I mean, some sort of if there was a way to model, okay, by trying to invest time in developing this sort of capital, that I'm expecting this result, and therefore this is a continued worth the business effort and time. Because I guess for me, where I get stuck is I get stuck in all the things that I want to do, and intellectually getting all this. I'm like, oh my god, this makes total sense. Like as you're talking, I'm like, oh my god, I got to do this and I got to do that. I got to do there's 15 things that I'm taking off my head. It's like, oh, I should be doing a podcast, and then I know what's going to happen. Like I'm going to get done with this call, and I'm going to be diving into today's to-do list, of which I'm going to get through a third of it. So I guess it's almost like if there was lean startup analytics applied to developing other forms of social capital. And Spike, you're probably the best person on the planet to speak to this. So I don't know if this was a topic you wanted to talk about, but I guess it's just more of a statement than a question. Is that's where I get stuck with this in terms of figuring out what to do next.
I would actually kind of flip that question on its head, and I would say I haven't looked as much at analytics. However, I have aligned my so helpful to the test that I wanted to run anyway, if that makes sense. So the helping part comes as the flow. It's not an action that I take sort of in isolation. It comes as part of what I do, because in my case, for example, mentorship is what I do, is what I want to do. It's my mission, it's my vision long term, it's helping early stage startups. So I have a bunch of things that I'm trying to test as part of advancing, figuring out better curriculums and how to help people. So rather than sort of thinking, oh, I'm treating helping others as its own things, it's incorporated in the work that I would do anyway. So instead of just saying, oh, I want to interview an entrepreneur, so I'll go out and interview an entrepreneur, no, I'll just go out and help an entrepreneur. And as part of helping that entrepreneurs, something will emerge that is that learning that I wanted anyway. So I kind of look at basically incorporating all the so helpful things with my my lean startup course. And you can think of it as in terms of handling startup, to go back to the edges, you'll have to test partner hypothesis, you'll have to test customer hypothesis, you'll have to test website hypothesis. So as you do that, which you would do anyway, instead you maximize it for help. So basically, as you run those tests, you'll maximize them for help. And as you do that, you get that feedback, but you're helping. So either way, you're giving, and the person that is working with you and also becomes, again, a partner, as Jen was saying. And just to add to that, I can 100% testify that works in all those forms of capitals, because I've gotten a lot back from those interactions in those exact ways. Like I have people that call me and say, oh, I'm a business person, I need a technical co-founder. I've had that question a million times. Well, guess what? I have a person that it's been wonderful and helping me and buying into what I'm doing, because I was helping him working through his business challenges and he had technical know-how. And so we ended up with that exchange, and stuff and building things that would have cost me thousands of dollars or many man hours myself, since I can code, that I didn't really want to do it. He took it on. And so for me, that's been like a huge advantage toward any other early stage startup that wanted to, either had to pay or to invest that time. Same goes for spreading the word, and like a lot of the people that have come to me as mentees were referrals. Those came out of helping others. Same for the website, like feedback and things that I've got about the website, about that touch point, were as part of helping conversations, like someone that asked, maybe they knew how to do ABA testing or website development and whatnot, and they were asking about their copy on the website or how to reach customers. And so we talked about that, and through that we had a conversation about web technologies and how to develop certain things, and so he helped out. It totally, I can really testify to what Jen said, and as far as analytics, I guess you could certainly frame it, but I would actually argue that instead of looking at the analytics of that, really you make it a part of the core value of every single interaction that you have. So really the analytics and the metrics remains the learning that you have about your own startup, except that every single step and every single move you make, you're helping somebody, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does, Spike. I think it's right. You're just talking about it's. I guess you're thinking that this is a core value of who I am and how I work, not necessarily a tactic like that I can measure. Anyway, you can tell by my question where I am with my business right now in terms of what I'm working on. So we've got it like we can go like a minute or two here because we started a little bit late. But Brian, anything you wanted to ask or jump in on since it's been most of the three of us talking the whole time?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to thank Jen for kind of opening my mind to different ways of being helpful. I think we go in with blinders sometimes. I think you just expanded my viewpoint on other opportunities of how to approach this. But for me, I'm trying to incorporate the So Helpful philosophy inside my customer development process. As I go through, I'm trying to solve one particular problem right now, but I know I'm going to run into customers that I can't help with the problem I'm solving, but I still want to find a way to help them. So that's a little bit of how I'm trying to incorporate the whole the So Helpful process in my customer development funnel. But I just wanted to say, Jen, thank you again for kind of sharing some new ideas and concepts. I'm glad I jumped in here midway through, so thank you.
Yeah. So Jen, you any last things you want to maybe wrap up with, and then I'll sort of say goodbye to everyone?
Not a whole lot. We're running, towards the end here, but I want to thank everyone for listening. And, ultimately, it's amazing because these are ideas that I had before I launched my business just a few months ago, and I'd played with. But when I came and built this presentation to talk about it, I as well, Kevin, went, wow, you know what? I realize these things, but I am not optimizing these different things. I'm not thinking this, there are these other things that I can be injecting into what I'm doing that would be optimizing these other forms of capital that I haven't been, and I haven't been as helpful as I can be to my community. And I just within the last few days have started making some tweaks and seeing it, just track it if I want to. It's not something I could have taken, as Spike said, and kind of followed every step of the process. It would have actually potentially lost value doing that. But it was a recognition of, of my business where I think you also taken a lot out of this, and I think that's a lot of times the goal is, when you are thinking about helpfulness, yes, I want to be helpful to others, but I'm so grateful I've gotten out of this, and that's us. And thanks, Kevin.
Yep. Great.
For
Not everybody for joining us.
You really got together this.
Hey, Kevin, sorry.
Sure, go ahead.
If I can have one last second. I actually want to try and answer your question. I guess I do measure a bunch of things in the sense of being helpful. I guess I should have added that, in the sense, like, for example, I'm trying to help people. Well, am I effective at helping people? So, for example, I do calls. I try to do recurring calls because I feel like I need more than one call over time to help people. So, for example, I'll monitor the number of recurring calls. And obviously, like, we have the review after the call. So do they give feedback? Is it positive? So I'll obviously monitor that. So I think you can definitely put some metrics to it. And obviously, being someone that is into lean startup and the whole analytics part, for sure, I do keep an eye on certain things. But I think, again, it's those metrics are a function of, am I doing the right things to help people, rather than it's being helpful to others being helpful to me? Because I think if you still do it in function of yourself, it defeats the point. I think if you really embrace it, then you can have metrics to make sure that you're being effective and things are going the way you want to. And again, that really depends on the type of business. If you're trying to get, if it's looking for leads for customers, there's certain things that you can measure, and the time you spend and the returning calls and the reviews and all those things. So we can certainly put some metrics to it on a specific case-by-case basis. But yeah, it's really important to not look at it as a tactic and really make it a core value. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Spike, for that, and thanks, Jen. Thanks, Brian, for joining us. Great, guys, and thank you for joining us on a Father's Day during the last round of the U.S. Open and during the World Cup. So we managed to still get people on the phone despite all of these things going on. Thanks a lot, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and stop the broadcast now. We can chat a little bit if you guys like.